And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery. And apologies for that little screw up on my end. I forgot that I'm using full screen share, which I don't usually do. But the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra. And today we're doing something a little bit different. With me for this particular experiment is good brother the Temple and the man behind Planet Bound, creating hardcore games for hardcore gamers, our good brother Jeremy Jack.
Yes, sir.
So, as I hinted at, this is a unorthodox concept to go with.
Yeah.
Now, what this is mainly going to be doing is reacting to the art that I had commissioned for the FF Legend project. A lot of this art was done over the course of a year and a half, in increments of 6.
And I'm gonna learn so much about this, your process as we go, because I didn't know how this went, so I didn't even know about that it had been done in six piece increments.
Yeah. The main reason to do this is, for starters, getting an outside perspective, but also getting a perspective from someone who's already an artist. I will admit a bit of the inspiration to do this was looking at people like Blacklist Universe and a few others break down the god-awful character designs in Concord from a character design perspective. A lot of people have talked about how the character designs in Concord were shit. Nope, there's no mystery there. But seeing it from the perspective of people whose job is character design or have an artistic background gave me a lot more insights.
Yeah, it sure does.
It's in the same vein as say when Sailor Vince a few years ago did a video reacting to the Cost of Concordia video that Internet Historian did, because he's a member of the Coast Guard up in Canada, has a legit sailing background.
Right.
I think the academy he was at was in British Columbia.
Okay.
And because of that, it was a fascinating look at how international maritime law actually works, and the fact that the whole sail by salute that the Concordia was trying to do is technically illegal.
Wow.
Aside from just pissing off locals, it's illegal to do that, to use the horns in that manner.
Interesting.
Now, for the purpose of this, we're going to be going through the art that I had collected for the project, mainly the races and classes. There's a few other non-standard art like for the weapons, but I didn't think it would be relevant for this. And the reason I got Jeremy on for this is because a lot of the art in Planet Bound was done by him.
Yeah, all of the art in Planet Bound was done by me.
Yeah. So having a perspective as an artist would make things interesting. We'll start with the races, and then we'll go through the classes and jobs as we get to them. And
yeah, and just to qualify myself, while I did the art for my own game, yes, I've been a commercial illustrator for over 20 years, and I've worked on a lot of games and video games, a lot of which I don't even know the titles of, because when you're a contract artist like I am, often when you get gigs, you're signing non-disclosures. You don't even know the content of the game. You're just getting an assignment, like draw, X amount of facial expressions of this type of thing for this type of thing, or draw X amount of characters that look like this in this type of setting. And so I'm just pumping out illustrations. So I've been doing this for a long time, and so I definitely have an eye for when it's good and when it's not.
Yeah.
And most of these character illustrations were done by, forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, June Chris. Awesome.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of the design references and direction I was very, very hands-on with. As as you're no doubt aware, when it came to,
Okay, there we go.
when
Forgive me, you cut out for a second. What was that?
um June Chris had handled a lot of the designs,
Yeah.
but I was very hands-on throughout the entire process.
Well, that's what makes it great. When you're the game creator, and there's just a few things that I'll say about this part of it. When you're the game creator and you're working with an illustrator, and you have a vision for your book, and that cannot be left up to chance. If you're a good designer and a good game creator, you're going to be with them. You're going to be sitting down and going through all the things. I will just comment in general on because of course I did all the layout and formatting for Planetbound 2, and I call that colloquially the chrome of a game. And the chrome of this game is just fantastic. It not just June Chris's work, which we'll talk about throughout this, but because I'm primarily a concept character designer, but the whole chrome, the whole layout is really just exceptional from multiple angles and multiple choices.
Yeah.
But the best indicator of great chrome in a book is what I call easy on the eyes, meaning my eyes aren't going nuts trying to figure something out. My eyes aren't trying to understand what's happening on the page, or confused by illustration, or confused by something. And none of that is happening in this. Really fantastic job on the chrome.
Yeah. So, starting with the races and going in alphabetical order, the first one that you should see is the android.
Yeah.
This one is very much meant to be the robotic companion, the characters that would have the "Am I a real boy?" kind of story. I brought up as a point of reference the cast type race that's shown up in the Phantasy Star series since Online, which are a robotic race essentially, as well as some of the androids that you see in Destiny, though that one was a lesser example. Basically, a humanoid appearance that borders on some robotic elements. I did also show some concept art with some of the Mega Man X games.
Oh, okay, very good. Very good. Yeah, I can see all of that reflected in here. One of the things that I really appreciate about these designs overall is they are not just recreations of Final Fantasy character archetypes or classes and or jobs that are in. Clearly, these are all from Final Fantasy, race, class, and jobs. However, they're not just a copy paste of those things. You clearly gave all the direction that you just said you gave, and then June just created these very unique, meaning it's its own piece, but it feels 100% Final Fantasy. Mechanical of all sorts shows up in Final Fantasy everywhere. That's why I often refer to it as in that science fantasy genre, because it plays so much with technology in a lot of ways. And this is a great example. Androids show up all over the place. Mech shows up all over the place, and having it as a playable race, right on.
So the next one is the Aura. This is the dragon folk like race that first showed up in FF14, specifically in one of the expansions. And
go ahead.
I had noted that the Aura's designs in FF14 lean into a very samurai approach. I had asked to lean more into a Chinese approach.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see the Chinese approach. Was never super into 14, so I'm not super familiar, other than I know the Aura and I've seen depictions of them. This is a cool design. I have no emotional attachment to these, so it's not like I don't have that like, oh wow, but great designs.
Yeah.
Uh, looks looks great. I'd play them.
Hmm.
Um, I just don't know enough about the peoples
Yeah.
to comment on that aspect of it.
Hmm. So next is the Banga, which first showed up in Tactics Advance and later on would show up in 12.
Yeah.
And because of a lot of the designs for the Banga, and I should note a watchword that I was using when I would submit the outlines was familiar but different.
Oh,
Was
very good. Yeah.
was designs that had minimal clothing because, well, in 12 it's trying to have a very fertile crescent leaning, and there's a bit of that in Tactics Advance as well. But I decided to go with them having full-on knight-like gear. And part of the
Yeah, that was
reason
an
I had
interesting
that,
choice. Yep. Yeah. So I want to hear that.
the reason I decided to go with that is that while you should never call a Benga a lizard unless you want to get your ass kicked, they very much have salamander-like qualities,
For sure.
and it put this idea in my head of them covering themselves in armor because this particular because I wanted to go with the idea of a offshoot of Benga that were in a more temperate climate, so they would wear armor that seals up more body heat.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, what I thought was so cool about this is that you, not that I remember, you don't really see Benga in any sort of real armor in either Tactics or in 12. However, if you're gonna put, and I love the climate conversation for the design of them, and I know that you shouldn't call them lizards ever, but I love that the plate is the plate and the underlying chain feels like scaled off of them,
Mhm.
which is just, I mean, they look like lizard people, and
Yeah.
I know that they don't like to be called that, but it fits them so well.
Mhm.
This is a
So
tough one, and designing the helmet for this, I just
oh,
thought was such a cool idea. Like,
yeah, and
I mean,
that was their idea.
yeah,
That wasn't something that I had put in. I just said I wanted to lean into knightly armor that's built around their particular anatomy.
yeah,
Uh, then we have what was originally the Cremier, but we retitled it Burmesian. These would be the rat folk that were in FF9.
yes. I'm so glad that you included these guys.
And
I think this race is super cool.
a lot of the motifs with them very much felt like um, Renaissance France.
Oh yeah.
And because of that, I had sent references to medieval or mid Renaissance outfits that you might see in France, as well as bringing up things like the Musketeers, because when it comes to Renaissance France, that's what a lot of people are going to think of is Dardigan's epic,
For sure.
as well as the Man in
Yeah.
the Iron Mask. But that's because I'm biased.
Yeah.
Also, I want more people to watch Gankutsuo, because say what you will about Gankutsuo, you will not forget it, especially its art style.
Right. These designs are just fun. Was June Chris is June Chris a Final Fantasy fan themselves?
They are,
Okay, great.
which does make things a little bit easier, though
It sure does.
I did supply specificity, because someone being a FF fan, that could mean they're a fan of the whole franchise, or it could mean that they're a fan of specific entries.
Oh, very, very much.
And
so.
I
Yeah.
can't assume that. I actually made that assumption once with the Al Ra design, which resulted in a design that is not in the book, but I still have. That was because of a miscommunication.
Oh yeah, it can happen when you're not familiar with something. Then yeah, it can go wrong pretty quick in Final Fantasy. What I really like, especially, is that left design. I don't know if the viewers can see things or not, but
Oh, they can
there's
see it.
Okay, great. The design with the long jacket, it's just so them, and just different enough for it to feel really cool and fun.
Hmm.
Um, I thought that this was such a great. I forget the name of the main character in the game.
Oh,
I
you're
don't know why it's not coming to me.
well, Zidane wasn't a Burmesian. If you think of the Burmesian, like that would be Freya in 9.
Yes, okay, exactly. Uh, Great character, great design for these guys, and just really executed well here.
Yeah. So next is the dwarves, and I had specifically stated right from the outset, I do not want Tolkien-esque dwarves. I do not want dwarves
Oh no!
that are poor man's Norsemen. I didn't want anything like that, because the way that they're depicted in the games, the whole lolly-ho thing that they like to say,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I wouldn't be surprised, given the influence that early Disney has on anime. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the big inspirations for the dwarves in Final Fantasy was the
Was
dwarves in Snow
hi
White.
ho. Yeah, correct.
And instead, I had said, I want you to look at mining outfits and trench uniforms in World War One.
I am an these are some of my favorites actually. I think that this design is so cool for them. No, for two reasons. The references that you gave
Mm-hmm.
is so indicative of the depiction of dwarven kind in Final Fantasy. Particularly, this feels like Final Fantasy the original, that game.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love is because number one, I have a lot of nostalgia around that game, and number two, the dark, I can't see the skin, but I can see the eyes, and then these outfits that are just like in my head as a 10-year-old. That's what I pictured that these guys would wear, and seeing it fully illustrated like this just gives me tickles.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so great.
Yeah. So the next was the Elvon, which is my stand-in for any elf or elf equivalent in the various Final Fantasy. In 14,
Right.
they were called Elzen, but I had to pick I had to pick one name to represent the elf stand-in.
All of them. Yeah.
So Elvon is what I went with. A lot of
That
people, when they
works.
depict elves, they'll depict the noble with high fashion and all of that kind of stuff. I was like, I want to do something different. I wanted to depict a version of elves that lived in more harsh environments, especially like more jungle type of environments.
Yeah, I love it. It definitely has the wild elf feel to it.
Mhm.
And it still feels Final Fantasy though.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy itself often depicted elves in the high elf way, not always, but so this is great. Just like, hey, you're playing this, you're just taking the race. Do what you will with it when it comes to class and jobs, but here's the
Here's an example of what can be done.
deconstructed, yeah, version of it.
And I had said that I wanted something that leaned a little bit Norse, a little bit sword and sorcery was the wording that I used.
Yeah, and I like that. I was going to mention that it has that nod to it. Of course, they're not going to wear these type of clothes in the far north, but it still feels like that.
Yeah, no, it's in the same vein. We've had elves in forests, but they're always temperate British style forests. I was like, what about elves in a full on jungle?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Yeah.
But then we have the Hume, which is the human stand-in. There's a lot of ways
Right.
that this could be done, but I was like, let's go steampunk.
Yeah.
Because one,
I love that
I
you
love
did.
steampunk, and two, I wanted to put in one nod to one of my other favorite RPG franchises, Wild Arms.
Yeah. Yes. And it was so funny that you say that, because when I was looking over this stuff earlier today just to refresh myself, I was like, man, this feels like sidearms, and I love it.
Hmm. And
Yeah, one thing else. Oh, go ahead. You can talk
that
more about the
that of
references.
course means that you have to have monocles, and you have to have gears. This is
Of
how it
course.
works.
Yes, this is how it works.
Mhm.
I what I really appreciate about June Chris period is that you the there's something in that you're doing in any type of character design in especially in humanoid type characters where you're when you're wanting it to feel like something 3D, and when you're wanting to feel like it is placed well. I'm trying to think of the academic words that we use for this. Regardless, the center line of especially the two on the left is so clean. They feel so grounded. They feel so solid. And there's several. I'm using these two as the
Mhm.
example, but there's so many that June Chris did that have just really good center lines. So just feel like solid character concepts.
Mhm.
And
So
of course, I love all the steampunk
yeah,
feeling of the costume design, especially the females,
yeah,
are just I love it.
yeah. So next is the Mithra, and they're referred to as the Mithra in 11 and the Makote in 14. They're basically the catfolk, and
Yeah.
a lot of the approach when that's taken with the catfolk leans into Fertile Crescent. I
Oh,
had said instead, let's go with a Mongolian approach,
oh,
and
cool.
I had sent references to male and female Mongolian dress.
Awesome. I love it. I like that you chose that. Again, 11 and 14 weren't my jam, so I'm unfamiliar with the how they designed it, but this feels very natural for a cat like people.
Hmm. Then we have the Mughals. Uh, I was debating about whether or not to do the mole rat approach of early Mughals, or the more humanoid adjacent, mousy look of say Tactics Advanced with Mont Blanc. So I
Yep.
said, screw it, let's do both. Now,
I'm so glad you did.
as far as why I went with this, I had June go with a mailman look. I don't remember what gave me the idea to do it, but when the idea set in, I was like, oh, there was the Mognet thing in 9. They have perfect flight. Why not have them be mail carriers?
Totally, and the way you describe it in the actual gameplay book, it is so perfectly fits this. It so perfectly fits that idea of a um, carrier. It doesn't have to be male necessarily, but the carrier pigeon
Mhm.
that Moogles can be. And I love that you went with both designs so that players could choose which one that they wanted to go with. I think because I love both.
Mhm.
I've always loved both, and so letting the player choose is cool.
Yeah. So then we have the Rogadan, and this is another race that was meant to represent two races from 11 and 14. I
Yeah.
went with I went with the Rogadan because I thought they had a unlike I like the Galka, but I thought the Rogadan had much more fertile ground to go with. So
Well,
within 14, there's the lore of the Rogadan being sailors, and I as well as the fact that their two sub races are named after different types of Norse giants.
yeah.
But I didn't want to just revisit Norse. Then I remembered that Norsemen were proficient sailors before the whole raiding thing.
Oh, of course.
And it put this idea in my head of imagine imagine if the Vikings had survived all the way to the age of sail, but kept a lot of their traditions intact. And that was the direction I said to go in. A mixture of Viking and Age of Sail.
Yeah, why not? I mean, that's a cool idea. Again, there are people I'm not familiar with or races I'm not familiar with because 11 and 14 were my jam, but that whole concept is totally reflected in this.
Mm-hmm. Uh, But then we have the Ronso, obviously from 10. When I
I'm
was
so glad
doing
these guys are in
research,
here too.
I was doing research on the Ronso. There was notes that I found that one of the big inspirations is the Rakshasa, which is a figure of myth that you see a lot in various forms of East Asian myth, especially like India, China, Japan. It's been around, and there was also the notion of them having combat functional type
One of
of
my
clothing.
favorite parts of 10.
And
Yeah, right.
because of the fact that their home turf in 10 is this mountainous region, it put the idea in my head to lean into the designs of Tibetan monks.
Yeah, cool. Like that, it totally fits them.
Mm-hmm.
They feel very Ronso. The Ronso, they were one of my favorite parts of 10, and they're not an easy thing to depict and make it look consistent with everything else. But I think June Chris did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
This one is a challenging one, but and all the nods that you said, hey, let's do a Tibetan monk type look, definitely are incorporated here and really do fit Ron so well.
Mm-hmm. So then we have the Tarutaru, which this is another 11 and 14 representative. We went with the Tarutaru because we do not like the way the Lalafell look. But also, again, I had to pick one, and it was tricky to pick something to go with, because with the Tarutaru, they're mainly described as making up for their small stature and not so strong physicality by being very proficient in magic. So the approach that I had said is to look at the designs of religious figures throughout Europe. Like, look at the designs of priests, which, as well as the designs of wizards, which is where you get this kind of approach.
Yeah, it fits them. It's appropriate to the race, meaning, okay, physically, obviously not imposing, but hey, we can do some pretty extraordinary magic, especially the female. It really fits the bill. And what's fun about the male is that it's like, okay, it doesn't just have to be a sorcerer or a wizard. It can also be some sort of adventuring mage too.
Mm-hmm. So then we have the Varg. This is meant to be the stand-in for the werewolves that you saw in 5.
Yeah.
They only I didn't want to do the European werewolf look, so I was like, let's go a bit Greek with the design.
Oh, cool.
Like, let's go with Greek, with the full-on skirting and the musculata and all of that. And this was the result.
Yeah, I feel that fun designs, and obscure. I love the obscure.
Mm-hmm.
So just a cool obscure reference to 5.
Yeah,
which is one of my favorites in the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. But then there was,
and this is one of the few. This is one of the few. Back on the Varg, this was one of the few where June Chris did a full body and then upper body, not just bust, but at the pelvis up. And I'm glad for this one that they did, because this is not going to be one that the Varg are not going to be one that people are that familiar with. So doing something a little bit more up close with the face was a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So then there's the Vieira.
Yeah. And
for the Vieira, I did outright say I want to lean into the Fertile Crest with this one. But I wanted to make sure that there was a male and female representative for this. And I said for the male one, if you have to crib some notes from the Prince of Persia, do that.
Cool.
Because if I'm gonna steal, I may as well steal from the best.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like these designs for the Vieira.
Hmm.
But both of them are exceptional. Both of them definitely have that Fertile Crescent jam.
Hmm.
It's immediately attractive as like, oh, this of all the races, this one was his design, the male design. I'm like, oh, I want to play that guy.
Yeah. But then we get to the classes and jobs, and the first one, of course, is the warrior. Now, admittedly, figuring out a direction for the classes was tricky because the classes are meant to be chassis.
Right.
So with
Yeah, I'm surprised that you even did illustrations for them, because the jobs were more specific, but you did do illustration for each of the classes as well.
Mm-hmm. So I realized it was going to be necessary going forward. But with the warrior, I'd mainly shown art and concept art of the warrior of light as depicted in the Dissidia.
Yeah.
Some aspects of the design that Amano did for the warrior class in the original, and some of the design from the original Dissidia on the PSP.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's even some nod. It feels like the illustration for one, meaning the actual title of Final Fantasy, the background illustration, which by the way, that was such a great idea to use the actual, for each of your chapters, to use the games in order. But it feels like that too, which is great, because that's where this class began for all things Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm. And obviously the warriors' associated jobs are meant to be leaning into physical combat.
Obviously,
but the first was the Berserker, and I obviously wanted to do the sword and sorcery kind of Conan-esque thing, but I decided to have it lean into FF instead of utilizing like a bear pelt or a wolf pelt or something like that, go with the pelt of a behemoth. You know, something that is certainly fits that same beast category, but is in keeping with Final Fantasy.
Yeah, the great idea. I almost wish June Chris would have leaned even more into it, so that you're like, oh, it's super recognizable as the behemoth. Once you said it, I can see it now, but it would have been, if you want to really lean into something Final Fantasy, I think that's a cool idea, and it could have gone a little further with this one.
Mm-hmm. But then we have the Dervish, which I had said to lean into a kind of combat dancer approach, including with dual weapons. Because the idea with the Dervish, which there isn't a Dervish job in FF, but I wanted a dex build sister to the more strength build of the Berserker. You know, one that's more speed versus power.
Right. Yeah, what a great idea for this, because what's so interesting is that even though it's not an FF thing specifically, it feels very Final Fantasy, and it is an important thing in a role-playing game. This not as opposed, but complementary to the brawn, strong guy, the nimble, agile character. That's a great choice, and to do it as an entertainer is great, because there's so many examples of that in Final Fantasy. Entertainers are all over the place in Final Fantasy.
We'll get to the entertainer.
Yeah, I know that, but I mean, like, so to make a physical warrior class that's gonna be the more dexterous, having it nods to the entertainer was a great idea.
Mm-hmm. So, with the Dragoons have been a staple since the early days, but I wanted to lean a little bit. I said to lean a little bit Eastern, and I specifically referenced Guan Yu.
Okay.
Now, the giant dragon helm was June's idea, I
Yeah,
had
it's what.
I had
Go
specifically
ahead.
said that the Quan Dao spear was something that I wanted to go with because I didn't see a reason
Cool.
why a halberd couldn't be used by a dragoon.
Yeah, oh, it totally feels Dragoon. Yeah, I mean, completely. And the helmet does too. I think it's an interesting choice, and it's ooh, that's cool. Oh, it's a yeah, I could definitely see that. I'm glad that they added that element to this whole piece. I
Mhm.
do really like the shoulder pieces actually for this one. They're unique. It makes the thing seem imposing. Makes the wider shoulders than the actual character self, and the design is just cool, different.
Mhm. Yeah, but then there was the fencer, and with the fencer, I did bring up references like I believe his name was Kurosame in Type Zero,
Okay.
as well um as well as a few other characters. The idea with the fencer is weaponized. I challenge you to a duel. You know, the whole
Yeah.
taunting thing and having an enemy focus on them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's reflected here too. Yeah, this is just a super clean design.
Mm-hmm. The fighter.
And
Okay.
this is one of the few that actually has movement.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has, instead of just the standing pose, the demonstrative pose, it is, oh, there's action to this one, which is just an appropriate job to do action with.
Mm-hmm. Now, the fighter, it was an interesting case. I mentioned this to you before, but the idea with the fighter was to address the problem I have with the whole, oh, you can use any weapon in
Right.
a lot of games.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, yeah, the fighter in a lot of fantasy games can potentially use any weapon, but when they're going to be sticking with one particular way to equip their character, that effect doesn't have as much impact. So we went with this idea of the walking arsenal. Brought I obviously brought up some of the designs of these soldiers from 7, but more specifically, one of the concept arts I saw of the third class soldier in FF7 remake, as well as making it clear that they are meant to have a variety of weapons on hand. So you can kind of see that there's a shotgun on one
Yeah.
end, a machine gun on the other, and two swords on the back.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because there's it looks more I mean, fighter is an appropriate name for the job. And it looks, which is not just in the whole Final Fantasy series, you have the characters that you're playing, but there's all the NPCs, and there's a lot of soldiers in those NPCs, and I feel like that's like very reflective here. It feels like a soldier class, which is cool.
Yeah, the inspiration to do all the different weapons was Firion's depiction in Dissidia. If you look at the art of him and look at how he fights, he's using a bunch of different weapons all at once.
Yeah.
Now, with the knight, it was tempting to do the knight in armor approach, but I decided to lean a little bit more into the uniform designs of Balam Academy in FF8.
Yeah.
And go with this idea of somebody who is upholding that knightly idea, but jumping the timeline ahead a couple centuries.
Yeah, this is I really love the costume design.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just it's just spot on.
So
It really gives me one of the things that this one does for me and many others that I think is so cool about June Chris's art, his character art, is that you chose to do all black and white, and this is one, and many of the others, in fact probably almost all of them, I can see the color in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Like the design of the actual elements feel like my brain fills in the color. It's so
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah. But then we have the monk. Oh, I there's obviously a lot of different designs for monks that you can go with. I had said that I wanted one that was significantly rough, like somebody who has been out in the mountains for most of their life. And I had said, instead of leaning into just hand to hand, give them a weapon like a monk's spade, which is what you see here. It's just a double-ended one without the crescent. Huh.
Yeah, this is a great design. I'm surprised considering it's monk, which is just your whole persona, that it's such a tiny illustration in the book. But I get why, because of the content and where you were putting things. But yeah, this is a beautiful illustration. I really like this one.
Mm-hmm. But then we have the samurai. Uh, doing a samurai setup is going to be pretty easy, but I had specifically stated, instead of just giving them a sword, give them the full regalia, and the choice to add the spear was my choice, because you have the katana, you've got the wakizashi, and you have a yari spear.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I think that those were all good choices. I think that depicting this samurai job as a, full tilt,
mm-hmm.
that it just doesn't feel generic, which is great.
Yeah. There's some of the art for the samurai job in some games feels more Ronin than samurai.
Oh
I
yeah,
was
absolutely.
tempted to lean into the full armor look, but I felt that would,
Well, that wouldn't feel I don't think that would feel Final Fantasy.
no.
This feels Final Fantasy still.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I wanted an excuse to have some inference of a colorful kimono.
Yeah. Yes.
But
again, my brain fills in the colors, which is great.
But then we have the Sentinel. This one was leaning a little bit north, as you can see. But the idea with the Sentinel as a job is that they are defensive offense. The idea with them is that they gimp their attacking power temporarily to build up their Overwatch resource, which they use for their techniques.
Right.
So because I remember that one of the main things I said is that they need to have a large, oversized shield.
Yeah. Which is perfectly represented.
The reason I said go Norse is because, with Norse culture, you have the concept of the shield mate, which just seemed a natural fit.
Yeah. And I love that June decided to not just have this shield maiden persona, but made her physically imposing. Like, okay, great, you could do a shield mate of any size, but she looks large. Like, she looks like 6'2", mm-hmm. and more than fit, which is just a cool look for this job.
Yeah. So then we had the sniper. The sniper was originally going to be called the archer. We retitled it to sniper, but it still has the feel of the archer job. But I didn't want it to limit it to just bow and arrow.
Bow and arrow, right.
And obviously, you see the rifle on the back. The outfit reference that I sent was pike and shot era and Civil War era uniforms.
Oh, cool.
So you can kind of see that with that collar.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the costume on this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have jokingly said that this is something I could see myself cosplaying someday.
Oh, very cool.
I mean, all I'd have to do is just crib some notes from Civil War reenactors, and I've got half the work done.
Right.
But the big thing was demonstrating that you could do the sniper archetype without falling into the trap of needing to do a bow and arrow.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, because
It's Final Fantasy after all.
well, that and we did, as I've told you before, we didn't want the jobs to infer particular weapons.
Right.
And sniper is going to be is going to have a wider assumption than archer.
Correct.
So then there's the weapon master, which I remember that the weapon that I used as reference was used by the Imperial Knights in, I believe it was some of the Etrian Odyssey games. But I had specifically said I wanted a weapon that was going to be mechanically complex because of the fact that the weapon master, the idea with them is that they are on the opposite end of the fighter. The fighter gets a bunch of different weapons. The weapon master focuses on one particular weapon, but they can get more out of it than anyone else.
Right. Yeah, that it was cool to use such a unique weapon for that concept.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great idea.
Yeah. Now, when the expert class, trying to figure out a outline to send for the expert was tricky. So the approach that I said was to look at some of the classical thieves, as well as the design of the protagonist in My Life as a King. Especially since the thief isn't going to look like a fantasy thief. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I liked that. What I really like about June Chris's decision in this one is the pose. The experts all fall under various forms of outlandish type characters.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're undercover, that's what's outlandish about them. So that pose represents the whole class very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the first of the expert was the chemist, and the chemist is meant to be the item master. And right around that time, I came across a concept that I decided to run with, and that was the idea of a potion loader, like think of a firearm that loads potions, so you could fire potion effects at range.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just do the whole. Oh, you're an alchemist, so you got a bunch of beakers in a lab or something like that. No, I wanted to have a alchemist-like archetype that is someone who's going to be more in the field getting ingredients rather than being in a lab all the time.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that's what this gives entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Like the potion loader thing is super cool and feels very Final Fantasy, even though I don't think that shows up anywhere in the games. But that it feels like this guy is a field alchemist. Like he's putting stuff together on the fly, and or he's done all his tech at home, and he's going out and having adventures.
Yeah. I will admit, some bits of the design one of the references I did use was Lazard Valeth in Valkyrie Profile.
Okay, I don't think I'm familiar.
Which, the main thing that stuck with that was the glasses, but that's another story.
Okay.
Now, Covert Ops is meant to be the Turks, basically the spy fiction job.
Got it.
Which is why I said they're meant to have it be someone in formal dress, but one who would not stand out too much depending on where they're in. Which, admittedly, is a bit of a contradiction to have a design that stands out but is not meant to.
I know. Yeah, this is a tough one as far as a design to go for with it. I love the design. I mean, it's a unique. Well, it's not even necessarily unique. It's just a clean design, a clean drawing, and an interesting idea for a covert ops.
Yeah, because again, it had to be something that would blend in certain areas, but
Correct.
it's still a unique design.
Right.
That's why we brought up things like under 30 seconds when it came to the mechanics of it.
Right.
The idea
Yeah.
with the covert ops job is that they are meant to be able to be the face in the crowd.
Yeah.
They don't have some invisibility tech. They're just very good at making
That's
themselves unnoticeable.
Yep.
You know, they're right in front of you, but you don't see them.
But you don't see them.
Yeah. The Dynamo was originally going to be called the Gunner, but it went through a name change for a similar reason. And the approach that we wanted to go with is this freewheeling, almost John Woo like approach of being very good at not only not getting hit but styling on opponents. So I had said lean into steampunk, but also lean into both a melee and ranged weapon as part of the armament.
Yeah, I like that. The combination looks great for the job. It fits the job. This is definitely another one that I'm like, oh, I want to play that.
Mm-hmm. And I did mention going with a sawed-off shotgun because I realized later on that a lot of characters in Devil May Cry would fit very well with the Dynamo job.
Oh, sure.
But that was something I realized after the fact. But then you have the Machinist.
Okay, got it. Yep.
Yeah. And obviously the big thing with the Machinist is their automata companion. I had simply said give them some sort of flying option with some sort of gun. The design that we ended up getting of the Rabbit of Death was not in my initial notes, but I take it.
I love it. I think it's like so perfect for this idea. Like, and it feels very Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Because and the idea. I see Mario saying, "Nope. How can you be John Woe without a Beretta?" I don't like Berettas, if I'm being honest. I think they got way too many parts. But now with the Entertainer, which is the one that's next, there is no Entertainer job specifically, but I had felt that Bard and Dancer were thematically too similar to each other, and in some cases too similar mechanically to each other. Both of them being performance-based support jobs.
Right.
So I decided, why not combine them into Entertainer?
Yeah.
There's also the fact that the name Bard and Dancer carries connotations as far as what the performance is going to be, and if somebody wanted to do something Bard-like but is more of a actor or a poet, I wanted to give that option.
Yeah.
And yes, a lot of some of the references I sent were actually of like flamenco dancers, as well as the design that Yuna's dancer dress sphere had in FF10 too.
Right. Yeah, this is a cool design. I like this one.
Yeah.
And I like that there's no, there's not an instrument there. It is not specific type of entertainment, but it clearly feels like an entertainer.
Yeah, that was the idea, because I knew that if there was an instrument involved, that would end up being the focus.
Correct.
Now with the Gambler, this was a pretty easy one to do because yes, I did bring up Setzer, but since since they're all about manipulating Lady Luck, going with the whole card thing was certainly a must.
Of course, yeah.
Especially since I like to think that we have a better reels setup than some other games that have, because we didn't try and try to replicate a slot machine in dice.
No, right, correct.
That, and I feel that somebody who's doing a gambler archetype should be the type of person who knows not only how to play the game, but how to cheat and get away with it.
Right.
Like you look at plenty of gambler characters throughout fiction. They know how to play the stakes, but they also know when to cheat.
Yeah, and even you just mentioned his name from 6.
Setzer.
The Setzer. While it wasn't in the actual, when you're in combat, that didn't come up, but the way the character was in the world was definitely wheelie dealy. It showed up with that type of skill set.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to the general, there was an early draft of the outline that I had sent that had the general with like a battle standard, but I ended up nixing it because I thought it would be too complicated. The approach that I went with instead was this design that was drawing upon Captain Harlock and Alex Lowe from Last Exile.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I can see that. What's cool is that I a lot of the references that you've given me for a lot of this stuff, what I appreciate what June Chris did with it is it's not just like, oh, that's that. Like when you said Harlock, I'm like, oh yeah, now I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't have looked at this and gone, oh, Harlock.
Yeah.
Which is just that's a skill of a good character designer. I really love the uniform. It definitely feels like the general character.
Yeah, I had felt that as tempting as it would be to have the general in a standard military uniform, I had specifically said to try to downplay that because it's meant to be the frontline leader.
Right.
Somebody who comes up with these kind of tactics in the middle of battle. Obviously, right. The warlord in D&D 4th edition could be used as a frame of reference.
Right.
But the idea is their best tactics is not to hit you with their weapons, but to hit you with the party.
Right.
Or as one person put it, a barbarian hits you with his axe. A warlord hits you with his barbarian.
Right.
Now with the mediator, I mainly said to go with a more noble design, somebody who's meant to be the talker, because that's what the mediator more or less is. I didn't use the mediator setup in tactics because I knew it wouldn't work.
Right. I like the armor. This design is really interesting. The armor looking like a suit. Meaning that there's clearly a suit under there, but even the armor over it looking like part of the suit is just a cool concept for this.
Yeah, I've always had a fascination with that idea of a formal suit that just happens to have armor mixed into it.
Right.
Not like wearing Kevlar over a suit. That kind of defeat that isn't exactly the point. But when it comes to the medic, I had mainly said to look at like field medics in militaries, and I specifically said that it needs to have an oversized backpack. Because the medic is meant to be the non-magic healer.
Right.
Now, the little Moogle charm, that wasn't my idea.
It's great though. This you know what it feels to me as a nod to? There's a little bit of a Pokemon nod going on, and that just like t you know is the cherry on top of the Pokemon nod.
Mhm.
The this is one of my favorites. It's just super fun.
Mhm. Now, with the noble, I had referenced designs of several princesses throughout the franchise, but I specifically I do recall asking, do not put a crown on the
Mm,
character, because the noble is not meant to be a particular king, queen, princess, or count or whatnot. It's meant to be all encompassing for that person who holds some degree of political sway to the point where they can
stature,
have
yeah.
people to call upon.
Right. There's a few that like when I was thinking about what my favorite designs were done character wise in this, it was definitely hard to choose. But this is certainly one of my favorites.
Mhm.
And the reason from a character design standpoint that it's one of my favorites is not only is it totally represented of a nobility within a Final Fantasy type setting, but uh, execution wise, as far as craftsmanship of the artist, the draping of the costume is that's not an easy skill for an artist to execute well,
Mhm.
and just really done really well in this one.
Yeah. Now, the squire was another one that was kind of hard to pin down, because the whole idea with a squire is that they are a pocket pick kind of support, where
Right.
they're able to support other people based on the allies' choice of class. So the reference that I ended up using was the design of the novice class in Ragnarok Online.
Okay.
Uh, since the idea with the squire is that they're essentially the protracted rookie,
Right.
the kind of person who's been picking stuff up on the fly that isn't as flashy, but has its use.
Yeah, great support role in a party, and a great visual representation of that,
Mhm.
and of course making it look like a younger character is just apropos to the whole thing.
Yeah. And then there's the thief. I specifically said we're not doing the typical fantasy thief. We are doing Arsène Lupin.
I love it.
I wanted to do the gentleman thief
Yeah.
because I wanted to showcase that you don't have to be locked from FF6 with the thief design. If you want to have your thief be the gentleman thief who sends out his warning letter and then does the job anyways.
Right. Right. I played one of these gentleman thieves in a fantasy setting once, and I didn't care if I got caught. I mean, that was like the whole thing. Like, yeah, and let me show you. I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. It's this type of gentleman thief is so fun to play.
Uh, I may have mentioned this elsewhere. One of my favorite movies is Ocean's 11,
Right.
which isn't exactly the gentleman thief concept, but in terms of the methodical, active
Absolutely.
thievery,
Yeah. Yep,
is what
correct.
is what I ended up really enjoying with that, because it's not just the job itself, but the lengths gone to prepare for the job.
Right.
Getting the team together, scouting out the place that you're going to be robbing. Just the fact that you're going to be robbing 3 casinos in one night in Las Vegas,
Yeah, exactly.
which is exactly the kind of thing a gentleman thief would do.
Yes.
Something that everyone thinks there's no way you can
Something
rob that
that
place.
outlandish.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I love about the whole expert class is these are in their own way very outlandish characters.
hmm But then we have the mage. Oh, I had said to go with a wizard like this design, um, but one of the big things I did say with the mage class is to have it have a mage's staff and a melee weapon.
Yeah, correct. That was smart.
Um, if you look at a lot of mages in like Warhammer Fantasy, you see this setup a lot, especially for the elves, and even more especially for Teclis, who's the wizardiest wizard who's ever wizarded in Warhammer Fantasy. But the first one is the Arcanist. Before I even get to the Arcanist, any comments on the mage class design?
Oh no, I think it's great that the same things that you talked about. I think it was smart to, as a general overarching thing, to include a melee weapon along with a staff, and then a clearly, sorcerer wizard costume.
Yeah, but yeah, obviously after that we have the Arcanist, which the Arcanist showed up in for the After Years and a few other games as basically a black mage with a few extra steps. We redesigned the concept to be all about curses, and it's for that reason that you have this kind of design. I did specifically state to go with a hood, and going with the snake sword a la Ivy from Soul Calibur was my suggestion.
Yeah, it's great.
Instead, it would be tempting to go with like a ritual knife or something like that, a la a warlock, but I felt that was a little too obvious.
Yeah, I like the non-obvious choices that you made throughout all of this.
Because an Arcanist isn't going to want to take you out outright, because they want you to be alive so that you can be cursed.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the Black Mage, I leaned a little bit into the Black Mage concept art I saw in 14. When I sent the outline, but also those little elemental orbs you see, that was my suggestion, because the Black Mage is very much an elementalist.
Yep.
The reason you'd pick Black Mage is because you can do more with elemental damage than you can with other casters.
Yep. Yeah, that was a great choice. It's a difficult thing. It can be a challenging thing to try to represent an elemental magic user of any kind. So using orbs of the variety of elemental magic was smart.
Yeah, I had basically said these are the elements. I want one orb that represents each element.
Yeah.
Now, technically speaking, there is no cosmic mage in FF. Instead, there's the time mage. We just retitled it Cosmic Mage to better fit the motif, because what's time about throwing meteors?
Right.
I had mainly sent in references to the design of the time mage from like Tactics, and I said instead of a normal head on the staff, go with an orrery.
Yeah, that was smart.
To represent the idea with the Cosmic Mage is that they manipulate time and space.
Right, correct.
Although it looks like June couldn't resist putting a clock on the belt.
Yeah, I saw. But it's great. It really is. Like this is one of my favorites, just because it feels like a time mage.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning like what you ended up calling Cosmic Mage, because they're so encompassing of all things time and space. It's a good design.
Yeah. Now, the Necromancer, I did specifically state that I didn't want a Necromancer that looked villainous. I know a lot of Necromancers in fiction are, but we even have a side thing about how you can do a Necromancer that isn't evil.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things is that they have a undead companion who's usually a skeleton. But I love that aspect. I'd said let's have the skeleton look a little bit classier than just bones and rags. So we
Yeah,
have the skeleton in a butler's like suit.
I love it.
Uh, I think around the time I was replaying Folklore, which has a invisible man who still insists on dressing fancy, even though he's an invisible man.
That's awesome.
I mean, technically he's an unseelie, but you get the point.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Uh, and when I say fancy, I mean imagine an invisible man who's dressed like he's going to the opera and walking around with a cane,
Oh, that's great.
including having a having a monocle on his head. Um, with the Ravager, because of the design of the Ravager, it's one that doesn't really lend itself to um a particular character setup. Since the idea with them is that um they like to spam cheap spells in combos.
Yeah.
So I'd said instead consider the concept of a war mage, of a literal magic soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the result.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It feels like a magic soldier.
Yeah. I think what helps the whole magic soldier concept is the pose.
Yeah, the pose, the shoulder pieces, and the emblem, if you want to call it that, on the chest.
Yeah. But then we had the red mage. The obviously going with the musketeer like look was something I wanted to lean into when I sent the outline. As tempting as it would be to have to go with the rapier that the red mage has in a lot of the official art.
Yeah.
That idea of somebody who's okay with black and white magic and okay with weapons doesn't really fit the red mage as we've done it. They're more about balancing their use of black and white magic.
Black and white, yeah.
Which is why I said go with two staffs, one representing black magic, one representing white magic.
Yeah.
And this was the result.
Yeah. It totally represents that. But still feels red mage-ish.
Mm-hmm.
The meaning the look still feels red mage.
Yeah. Plus, we never see
Costume.
mages dual wielding staffs or wands or whatnot.
No, we sure don't.
I'm like, why don't we have that?
Yeah, exactly. Come on now.
Yeah. And with the sage, they are. I wanted to go with a very scholar type of look. I know we have the scholar later on, but
yeah,
the type of person who you'd see at the head of a wizard academy,
right,
was the design approach I had sent. Obviously, since Sage has shown up in several of the games, that reference was able to be used as well.
Yeah.
I will admit that I did suggest going with an elven look for the Sage. Don't know why I suggested that, but it is what it is. But then we have the scholar. The thing about the scholar in the mechanics is that they have a grimoire that allows them to equip more spells than anyone else.
Yeah.
You pick scholar if you want to be an even more casty caster.
Right. What I like about the design choices, I don't know all the influences that you had on it, but as far as just a character design, a scholar or anybody who's using a book of magic to do something, that coming up with poses for that is painful, to be honest. And I love that June Chris did something that I've never really seen before, where it feels like, hey, I'm about to take action with this book. Like I'm about to cast a spell with this book without just standing there with a book, holding a book.
Mm-hmm. Although if you want the ultimate pose reference, if you're having a sorcerer who's using a wand, go look at posing that's done by orchestra conductors.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
you will not be hurting for choice.
No.
But then we had the summoner. Obviously, I wanted to lean into Yuna's design in 10,
Yeah.
but I had also suggested going with a Shakujo as a staff. Uh, the Shakujo is the ringed staff that you see Buddhists carry. If you've seen
Yeah.
Inuyasha, you've seen that's the staff that Miroku had.
Yeah.
I do like that it was set up a little bit different than usual because of the whole two circles setup
Two
that we have.
circles thing. Yeah. I loved that. This is along with the noble competes for one of my very favorites.
Mm-hmm.
It has a of course the nod to Yuna is great. 10 is one of my favorites, and if you were, and I'm glad you chose that nod to represent the summoner, because to me, of all the games, she's just the ultimate.
I had flipped a coin between whether or not to go with Yuna as a primary reference to send, or Rydia.
I know, but I'm glad you used Yuna.
Mm-hmm. Then we have the white mage, and there were some people who were aghast at this design because it doesn't look like the white mage that started in 1.
What? Who cares? That's not the point. This is why this wins on so many levels. This is absolutely, if not my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
This design is it's so many nods to so many things white mage that you gotta love it. And if people can't see that, I'm very surprised. Then they're not really Final Fantasy fans. Because number one, some of my favorite costume designs are actually where costumes were used as a mechanic, which was Final Fantasy X-2. And the white mage costumes are some of the coolest costumes, and there's hecka nods in here to that, including the choice to do like legging type things, but still has the signature red wavy swirly what do you call that on the end of a hemline is just perfect. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think this is a great design for a white mage.
So I wanted to lean into the notion of white mages being priests.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's perfect for a white mage. It's just perfect.
That and there's always been this implication that they're supposed to be the stand-in for clerics, especially early on.
For sure.
Even having some turning like effects in the early days.
Yeah. Correct.
Which is why they have that buckler.
Right. Which is another great aspect to both the staff and the buckler. It's such a cool design. Yeah. This is just I'm gonna call it that this is my favorite.
Yeah. Now with the yokai, originally the yokai was meant to be the controllable summon, a la the way you control summons in 10, or the way they're an ally in 12. But then I saw the yokai, because the yokai name came from Bravely Second. Then I saw Yoko's design in that, who has the yokai asterisk in the game, and how it looked like she was a fusion of a humanoid and a nine-tailed fox. And I was like, all right, that's the route we're going. The yokai channels eidolons through their body and turns into a kind of fusion between themselves and the eidolon. And
yeah, I thought this was such a brilliant idea, like a non-Final Fantasy but totally Final Fantasy feel idea. I think it's great. And the I'm guessing this is Ifrit is what is being summoned in the actual yokai, and that's cool. It's just a cool human Ifrit hybrid.
I had thought about having other designs done of yokai with other eidolons, but I realized that would be kind of distracting from the point. So I had to pick one. Ifrit
Yeah.
was the one I had to go with.
Yeah, why not? I mean, yeah, for sure.
Especially
Uh,
since Ifrit has had a very interesting evolution throughout the series.
for sure.
Like
Probably more than any Eidolon.
in the early days, Ifrit very much looked like his namesake, very much looked like a genie.
Yep. Yep.
But as time went on, he started to look more like this bestial figure.
Correct.
Uh,
Which still has a
Mhm.
lot of genie implications in a lot of cultures. The beast-looking thing.
Yeah. It just didn't look like the typical full humanoid looking genie.
Right.
Uh, Now, when it came to the design of the adept class image, this was one that we ended up going through like 3 or 4 different versions that I had rejected, because
Okay.
the idea with the adept is that they're the in-betweener. And because of that, I thought the idea that I had was something that implemented elements of the other 3 class arts, warrior, expert, and mage. It wasn't until I sent an image of the Hexafusion art meme that June finally understood what I was trying to get at.
Cool.
If you're not familiar with the Hexafusion meme, it's basically taking 3 different characters and then showing what their combined looks like, or what it would look like if you combine 2 out of those 3.
Yeah.
And this was the final design that we ended up going with.
Yeah, it's great. It totally looks like the fusion of the other classes.
Yeah. You've got the bags from the expert, you have the staff from the mage, and you've got a sword to represent warrior, as well as the fact that it looks like it's doing a mix of robes and armor.
Yeah.
But the first one of the adepts is Beastmaster.
Mm-hmm.
I had specifically said this is one where you could lean into the ranger archetype, but the beast in question should be some sort of bird of prey, and the weapon of choice should be a crossbow.
Yeah, this is such a cool design.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot about this that is cool, but for me, as a child of the 80s, I just like instantly felt so much Lady Hawk that I loved it.
Yeah. Then there's the Blue Mage. With the Blue Mage, I had specifically said to look at the Blue Mage design in 5, as well as the design in 11. Hence the whole thing with the hat.
Yeah.
As well as using a scimitar as a melee weapon. A Blue Mage is a tricky thing to nail down into a visual style, because the whole idea with Blue Mages is that they're all over the place.
Yeah, I know, but what I think June Chris nailed in it is the expression. Like, come at me, bro. Like, just really do your worst, and I will acquire it from you, and I will do my worst. Mm-hmm. It's just like that's what nails this design.
Yeah, and I did hint that there's an implication that Blue Mages are looked at as a few eggs short of a picnic.
Right, and they are in the games too. I mean, 6 especially. Come on, that guy's loony.
Yeah. Then we have the Dark Knight. This may come as a surprise, but one of the references I sent for the Dark Knight was Vampire Hunter D.
Really? Like D or Dracula?
D.
Okay.
As well as referencing Golbez. It was tempting to do the Greatsword style Dark Knight, but I didn't want to create too much of a distraction. I'd also referenced the whole Dread Knight concept that's been around in fantasy and some SF for the longest time. Whether it be like Soth in Dragonlance, or even Darth Vader in Star Wars.
Right. Yeah, it has nods to all of that, which is great.
that imposing figure that
The imposed figure.
when they even if they're not as villainous as some of those characters, when they're in the room, people start to get nervous.
Right.
Uh, Now, with the Geomancer, you obviously have you have a Shakujo, but a different form. I had asked to go with a bit more of a Native American approach, which you can kind of see.
Yeah.
And as far as using a different type of Shakujo, first off, I just like that concept. And second, it just seemed to be a natural fit since the Geomancer in some of the art is very very much akin to a Taoist priest, which there are elements of in this.
Yeah.
But again, this is another one that's tricky to do because the whole thing with the Geomancer is they're terrain casters.
That's right.
So you could make a druid out of Geomancer, but if that's the case, just play a druid in some other game.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, this is fun. I mean, the job is a great job, and the design it is a good design.
I did have one person argue with me that the Geomancer should be in the Mage association, not Adept.
No, I disagree.
And the problem, yes, they were mages in 5, but that's one game, and I'm not writing a Final Fantasy V RPG.
Yes, and I mean their magic is environmental, and it works and functions differently than what we consider mage magic in Final Fantasy. White magic, red magic, black magic.
If I were to write a traditional magic list for them, I'd end up writing 11 different lists, and only 2 of them you might get use out of.
Yeah.
So
that would be like it's still akin to like putting blue mages up with the mages too. It just doesn't. That's not it's a different type of magic.
But then we have the illusionist. Obviously, I decided to go with the whole showman approach, and I did reference Zatanna,
of course,
when I sent the outline. The main thing I was a stickler on is it needs a top hat and it needs a cane.
Yeah, but I like the other choices. It makes it. I mean, it doesn't feel like a Zatanna ripoff. That coat is fantastic. I love the sleeves, the puff sleeves. Great.
Yeah, and probably the little confetti, which is.
Yeah, it's great.
I should note I ended up realizing afterwards that somebody could reflavor the illusionist to make a psychic job.
Okay.
Within a setting, since the whole idea with illusionists is that they are the magic equivalent of you activated my trap card.
Oh, okay, right.
They can't cast directly. They have to set up their spells to activate in reaction to something.
Yeah.
So it's like if that person tries to attack, then the spell goes off. Hence the trap card analogy.
Right.
And when it came to the Magic Knight, it's tempting to do Magic Knights with sword and board, but I wanted to send in the idea of sword and poke instead. Or poke and board, I should say.
Yeah, there you go. Why not?
And
yeah, people forget that there's other types of melee weapons.
But the central thing the reason for the auras that you see there is, unlike a lot of Magic Knight jobs where the idea is they're a fighter who can cast spells or something like that, I wanted the idea of they channel magic into their weapons.
Yeah, was it? Which one was that done in? Wasn't that done in 5?
Yes,
there was some.
It had the Spellblade.
Yeah, right. Spell. That's what it was. Yes.
And that is what I wanted to lean into. There was also the I did send as a reference the Magic Knight art from the vocation of the same name in Dragon's Dogma, because it had that similar motif.
Okay, cool.
Huh.
I like the cowl
Mhm.
choice. I think it's really good for this one.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to associate robes and hoods with mages, so best
Yep.
to lean into that.
Yeah.
Then there was the ninja.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different ways this could have been done. I was debating between doing the mask and doing the hood. I was like, screw it, let's do both.
Yeah,
And
right on.
because I wanted something different, because I had asked for something different, I said go with Tonfa blades instead. I
Yeah.
specifically brought up to June the Cipher sword in the Strider games.
Okay, yeah.
Is the idea of a bladed Tonfa I just find very interesting.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a great design.
Mm-hmm. Especially since
Yeah,
around that
and
time I was
executed.
playing Ninja Gaiden 2. I was playing Ninja Gaiden 2, and
Oh, cool.
the Tonfa in Ninja Gaiden 2 is a tricky weapon to get used to, but if you do understand how it works, you will not get hit.
Cool.
But the big reason I was thinking of doing the hood is I didn't want it to look like a ninja analog that you'd see out of the 80s.
No, right.
And as far as doing the mask thing, that was meant to be a nod to Edge from 4.
Oh, cool.
But then when it came to the Oracle, the main thing I said was to give it the... I wanted to go with this idea of somebody who utilizes bronze mirrors for predictions, as well as using a brush. I was leaning a little bit into wuxia-style predictionism with the outline I sent.
Right on.
And as an aside, why haven't brushes been seen more often as magical implements?
I don't know. You know, it's what's the little girl's name in 6? It really can become a very, very powerful character.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, and her kit would eventually reincarnate in 14 as the Pictomancer job.
Oh, okay. Is that what it is? Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I mean, even in 6, you could dismiss her, but by the end, if she's able to paint some of these monsters that you're up against, they do some crazy damage.
Mm-hmm. So the next one,
I like mixing the Oracle, meaning the Seer type of thing with that. It's good.
The next one is the Paladin, and with the I do remember with this one, the thing with Paladins is that in our system is that instead of them being a fighter who can do a little bit of white magic, their mechanic setup is doubling down on cover. They can much in the same way that a Dark Knight can sacrifice HP to do powerful attacks, they can sacrifice HP to do powerful defenses.
Oh, nice. So lots of protect spell type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Now, as far as going with the lance, that was a case of wanting to do something different, because I know it would be very tempting to go sword and board with a paladin design. And
yeah, it's a great choice to do a lance.
the reference point that I sent for the lance is the sword vent lance design that Kamen Rider Knight had in Ryuki.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a great design.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the Rune Knight, the main thing I had said was, this is meant to be the anti-mage, but give them a hammer instead of like a sword. So there's plenty of runic swords in fiction.
Yep. And in Final Fantasy.
And yes, the Rune Knight is meant to is largely inspired by Celes.
Yeah.
The idea being that they are there to screw over enemy casters.
Yeah.
The catch with them
Yeah.
is that if you pick Rune Knight, once you start developing Rune Knight abilities, your MP is at 0, and you can't keep MP between combats.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love that you chose something different than the sword. That I mean, that's just not speaks to all these designs. There's just some unique element that still feels Final Fantasy.
mhm.
Like if they were gonna design a rune hammer, there it would be. Uh, but that you chose some unique things is cool.
And I'm glad that it wasn't doing like Norse runes, because it'd be way too obvious. If
Oh
Norse
no
runes
no
were
no!
used on the
Well,
hammer, I would have.
Final Fantasy didn't do that either. So yeah.
Yeah, it's tempting to, if somebody says a weapon with runes, it's tempting to go with with Nordic runes.
Sure, yeah.
But I would have said, do it again.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Because and instead we have this elaborate design that looks like something you would see
Yeah.
on someone's fine china.
Correct, which is just perfect. Which is more of what I would. You don't get to see depictions of her sword, her rune sword, but that's how I would imagine it would be. Not any sort of Nordic rune, but you know, a blade that the design is the point. It's something that attracts magic.
Yeah. Like if I was designing another Rune Knight, then I gave them a sword, I would say look at the Elvish writing in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And lean into that.
Yeah.
Or just look at classical letters. But
Right.
now with the Sword Saint design, obviously one of the big references was Sidolphus TG Sid Orlando.
Yeah.
There's always been a part of me that wonders if that version of Sid in Tactics was inspired by El Cid, also known as El Campeador, the who's kind of a folk hero in Spain.
Really? That's cool. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, El Cid is, and obviously the name El Cid has been used in FF in the past,
Right.
but the big reason why I had that feeling is because he's described as a count and this renowned war hero. Let me grab his. His proper name was Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. Was a Castilian knight.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things I did specifically state is to them is it's drawing upon Edgar's whole counting up mechanic that you saw in 6. But I had suggested the idea of somebody who is such a master of swordsmanship that they can use swordsmanship without even having a weapon, which resulted in this idea of a sword that was literally made out of energy.
Right.
I.e., they're so skilled at swordsmanship they don't even need one. And
right.
The sword without the sword is a concept that's seen infrequently in wuxia.
Right.
So it was a natural fit.
Yeah, cool. And it's a good design.
Mm-hmm. See, the Astrologian, the big thing I do recall mentioning was have some sort of inference of a constellation, as well as the cards that are used in their particular brand of fortune telling. And a lot of fortune teller like designs, especially like Romany designs, certainly played a part.
Yeah, it's good designs.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely feels astrological.
Yeah, the whole idea with the Astrologian is reading the stars and then interpreting it through their cards.
Yeah.
Much like a fortune teller interprets a reading of the tarot.
Right.
But I didn't do an art. I didn't do a art representative for the independent jobs because that'd be distracting from the point.
Right.
But the first of the independent jobs is the Chocobo Knight,
Yeah.
which there isn't a Chocobo Knight playable job, though there's been Chocobo Knights that appeared, like the Chocobo Knights from Jose in 10, or
Oh yeah.
Judge Master Sid in Tactics Advance. But I remember seeing a concept art from 11 that had a knight on a chocobo wielding a lance.
Yeah.
And and when I suggested the idea of a chocobo knight, I had said, I want to see a lance charge on chocobos, damn it.
Right.
Like I want to see chocobo I want to see marksman doing fire and maneuver tactics on chocobos. Basically, any sort of cavalry tactics you might see in
Right.
historical military.
It seems like just such an perfect fit for it.
Mhm.
And just, the nod to Joust because I'm a child of the 80s.
Yeah, I enjoyed Joust until those fucking times when I overshoot and end up in the lava.
I know.
Uh, and
Yeah, no, so but speaking of the design, this is really a great design.
yeah,
Not easy to draw somebody writing something else and design a look on top of it to be like a character design is just not uh, an easy thing to do,
mhm.
and really executed well.
Oh yeah. Uh, Now, then when it came to the Crown's Guard, this was one of two jobs that we took from FF15. And I'd basically, since the Crown's Guard has this idea of pledging to a God King and getting getting an astral weapon from that God King,
Mm,
I had said to lean into a Royal Guard or Honor Guard type of
yeah.
motif, uh, using some of the outfits of Noctis's retinue late in FF15, post time skip as a point of reference.
Right on.
Uh, Now, the Exorcist, which is another case of using a book, I had basically said go with the idea of a traveling scholar,
Yeah.
since one of the core mechanical things with the Exorcist is that they can undo and redo damage, which
Okay,
admittedly is a
cool.
tricky thing to go with. But the idea of a wandering priest
Yeah.
or the like is what I wanted to lean into.
Yeah.
I think traveling occultist was something I mentioned in my notes.
There you go. There's several of the designs in
Oh, did I lose you?
and it's really well executed. It doesn't feel like overkill. It's not just a bunch of stuff all over the place. It feels like, oh, I wonder what that is. Now I'm curious to play this type of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I could certainly see it. So the net. So then there was the Guardian. Uh,
Hmm.
since the Guardian is all about the Guardian design in Bravely Second had this very large armor. And
Hmm.
hello there, Kinergy. We're just going over some of the art for my FF project. Um, the whole idea with the Guardian is that they get hit, they generate soul power and use that for special attacks. And
Yeah.
this idea of hard light energy armor got stuck in my head for the concept, and that was what I
Mm.
had submitted as the outline when I submitted it to June.
Yeah, it's you can see the influence and big armor As much as like people might think like, oh, you just drawn big chunks of stuff. No, it's very difficult. Again, when I talked about draping, armor draping is even more of a challenge when it comes to big, bulky layers of armor. For it to look interesting, you know, semi feasible and fantastical and all those things at once. Good job on this one.
So then there was the Gunbreaker.
Yeah.
This is meant to be the... Oh, thank you, Kinergy, for the follow. I hope you enjoy your time in the temple.
Yes, sir.
So the Gunbreaker is obviously meant to be the Gunblade class.
Yeah.
If you want to do Gunblades, this is the main way you do it.
Yeah.
We were very particular on what counts as a Gunblade and what doesn't.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you were. This was one of my favorite descriptions of how this mechanic and class, or excuse me, job functions and works, and the point of it. And I love that the illustration reflects that so well.
Yeah, for one, we didn't want to just limit ourselves to blade kind of Gunblades, hence the term gun arm. But also, the rule that, now for those who haven't read, the rule is if the gun part is meant to enhance a melee attack, then it counts as a gunblade then it counts as a gun arm for our system. If it's something that can slash and shoot, that would be a variable weapon in our system.
That's right. That's some sort of ranged variable thing.
Yeah.
These aren't ranged.
No. The trigger is this hits harder.
That's right.
So you can see he's got the revolver style gunblade set up, as well as the
hammer.
The hammer was taken from the gun hammer that's been in Monster Hunter. But the other reason I went with that was around the time I was writing the outlines, I happened across the Festival of Exploding Hammers in San Juan de la Vega in Mexico, which is the celebration of who's effectively a Robin Hood equivalent named San Juanito. Robbed from the landowners, gave to the poor. And part of the way that thing is celebrated is taking firecrackers, putting them on hammers, and then hitting the ground.
Cool.
And eventually, a engineer YouTuber had made a more reliable way to get that kind of effect, using a hammer that had a open spot where you could put a squib bullet in that would go off when you hit the ground.
See, yeah, right.
So that kind of thing led to going with this. Plus, I had said we need to have a gun arm representative that isn't just a gunblade, because everybody's going to assume gunblade, and this isn't meant to be limited to that. So he had suggested the gun hammer from Monster Hunter, and I'm like, you know what? Let's go with that. But there's a bunch of other examples within the book of other types. Because as nice as the gunblade is, I don't want it to be limited to just that.
Right.
But then there is the Kingsglaive. This is the other one we took from 15. This I had specifically said for this one. This is meant to be the more outside part of the Royal Guard. They're the ones who are more out in the field instead of being the ones who are protecting the God King or the God King's interests domestically.
Okay.
And referencing the Kingsglaive uniform in 15 was one of the starting points as well.
Yeah, and it's super clean design.
But the thing that's tricky about having a specific design with them is their whole thing is their ability to warp. Basically short-range teleporting.
Okay.
If you've looked at 15, you see that whole thing of throwing a sword and then teleporting to where that sword lands.
Right.
Which I think people underestimate how terrifying that concept would be if you could just throw a knife and then
horrifying. What do you mean?
And then immediately get within striking distance of somebody who thought you were at range.
Right.
And then there's the Magitech Knight, and this is one that almost got cut until I realized how I could fix it. Originally it was going to represent those Magitech Knight platforms that you see at the beginning of 6. You know, this idea that you're in a walker.
Right.
But I couldn't find a way to make it work within the parameters that the game is built around. Then I ended up watching a documentary on Anthem, which Anthem is, yeah, the game is shit, but the concept's stuck in people's minds apparently, especially after things like Eldritch Sands, which was very blatantly channeling Anthem. So I'm not going to defend the game, but clearly,
I know what you mean.
Clearly they were onto something. It's just that BioWare was not the BioWare of old, so they couldn't pull it off. Plus, pulling off a live service game for a studio that had never done a live service game in their life, and arrogantly calling it Project Dylan, as in Bob Dylan, because they wanted something that'd be remembered for years to come. Which, I guess it was, much in the same way that people remember the Titanic, or people are going to remember the 2024 Chicago White Sox for all the wrong reasons. If you're not aware with that setup, the White Sox broke the losing record that was set by the Mets back in the 60s.
Oh Lord.
122 losses in
Holy
one
smokes.
season.
Good job, White Sox.
They are the biggest losers since 1900.
Wow.
Think about
that's something.
Oh. But
this design is incredible, like really cool design.
Yeah.
I love that what looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, she used the android race, or excuse me, I don't know if June is a male or a female. But June Chris used the android race. It looks like it's really
well. I told June to go into power armor for this.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Because the idea with the Magitech Knight is that, you know how the Weapon Master can get more out of weapons? The Magitech Knight gets more out of the armor system. Okay,
cool. Which makes sense. I mean, that goes without having the big little, or not the big, but the walker thing that fits perfectly with them.
Yeah. So the idea is that they have this heavily customized set of armor that is less in the vein of a mecha and more in the vein of Iron Man. Not full on flight style Iron Man, like Gen 1 Iron Man.
No, right, yeah. Yeah, it's a great design.
Plus, there's been this idea that's always been stuck in my head, and I plan on doing when I write the Gaia setting, of treating mechas as in the same vein as ceremonial or ancestral armor for knights. You kind of have that with BattleTech, but not far enough. No,
you could really take that to some cool lengths.
Especially since, well, mech warriors are supposed to be are largely mercenaries in a lot of their depictions. So the whole, there is the Lorix Creed, but that's as far as it goes as far as the whole Knights of the Battlefield concept.
Yeah.
Now, with the Merchant,
this is such a fun design.
I did specifically said I wanted an oversized backpack with just a bunch of different stuff. I did reference Owaka the 23rd from FF10.
Yeah.
But one of the big things is that they can pull random shit out of their bag. Sometimes it's something useful, sometimes it's not.
Sometimes not so much.
Yeah. Like, not every job and class combination is meant to be 100% competitively viable. A lot of them are meant to represent certain feels more than trying to be full-on balanced.
Yeah. And
the Merchant, aside from being able to utilize the acquisition system better than others, their big thing is they got something in their wares that might be useful. Might be. Uh, and I will admit it's that part of the oversized bag thing that I went with was I've done a lot of backpacking and a lot of biking
Mm.
and going on that kind of experience because I've had to haul around oversized bags my whole life.
Mm.
So leaning into that for a traveling merchant seemed to be fitting.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a great design.
Especially since you can go with the gag of bigger on the inside,
Right.
or somebody telling the merchant, all right, empty your bag." And then they empty it, and then some more, and then some more,
And then some more, and then
and
some
then
more.
there's a big pile of stuff that they just happen to have in their bag, and they're just like, where'd you fit all of that?
Exactly.
Like a lot of my design ideas, I end up are me ripping off Chuck Jones.
Right on. Oh, well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Which I love. Man, Mary Poppins, it's all, it's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah. Now with the mimic, I had specifically brought up Harlequins.
Yeah, that's a great idea for the mimic, which is just, that I think I don't know of any other place they appear than 6 that I can think of.
There's the ability of mimicry has appeared in minor forms, but not in a full-on job.
Not
But
in a full-on job except for 6, yeah.
yeah, there's a little bit of DNA of Harl from Chrono Cross because I have committed the sin of actually enjoying Chrono Cross, according to some, and the fact that I've called people out for throwing Chrono Cross under the bus so that they can prop Chrono Trigger further up.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this elsewhere, but Cross was a very important milestone in my development when it came to understanding game mechanics,
Oh,
as
cool,
well as these styles of fantasy that I lean more into. Because Cross isn't really doing that medieval pastiche as much. Even in the more fantastical parts of it, you're on an archipelago. Your protagonist has a look more of that you'd expect from a fisher in Southeast Asia.
Right.
That kind of thing. And
yeah, I think the idea of doing this jester Harlequin is just perfect for this job.
Yeah.
This is a great design.
Plus, you can go ambiguous about whether or not the mimic is actually an elf or that's just part of the costume.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you don't even know.
Mm-hmm. And I did send reference images of French Harlequins.
Cool.
But the last one was the Spirit Master.
Yeah.
And I did reference Khan Senna from FF14 for one, as well as a lot of East Asian mystics, which
Nice.
you can kind of see in their design.
Yeah.
Spirit Masters are support elementalists, but they're also able to shift around buffs and debuffs. They can't get rid of them, but they can move who has them.
Oh, cool.
And that's kind of why I'm glad that there's the whole orbs thing connecting, because it can give that implication of transferring
of the
spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Spirit Master was another one that we took from Bravely Second. In that game, the Japanese version of it is Sage, but I had this idea of them being a defensive elementalist.
Cool.
As opposed to the Black Mage, who is an elementalist but more on offense. But keep in mind with all of these, you're not playing as just one archetype. You're playing as a combination of archetypes.
Right on. Yeah, correct. Exactly.
part of the reason that was done to begin with, and using the legend system for it, was the fact that there's so many different characters and jobs within the franchise that are in the margins.
Right.
So instead of having some convoluted multi-classing, we opted instead to give people a way to fill in those blanks themselves.
Correct. Yeah, I thought that was just a great how you guys chose to do classes and jobs is definitely the way to go in a Final Fantasy game.
Mm-hmm.
In the history of Final Fantasy role-playing games, this just is a cherry on top. This is on multiple levels. This is cherry on top. And I'm dying for all the other to come stuff. I mean, cybernetics, I'm dying for that. I'm dying for magicite, more expansions on how to deal with eidolons.
Mm-hmm.
The sphere grid, that is just such, I love that thing. I've loved it since the moment I saw it in 10.
Yeah, we're not
And
doing the sphere grid the way it was in 10 because I knew that would be impossible.
It is impossible. I tried to figure it out for Planetbound because it's just one of my favorite things ever, and I tried to figure out how, and it's just, oh, no.
I mean, the only person I can think of that came close is Ed Jowett for Era Lost Legend. And even with that, it's not a unified sphere grid. It is instead a kind of, I guess I could say it's more akin to the Zodiac jobs license boards, because it's split off into different weapon and casting classes because of the.
And so what are you guys thinking of it for this?
We have something that's for the sphere grid. We already have the idea down. It's already written out in the raw text.
Okay. I don't want you to reveal stuff that you don't want to reveal yet.
Well, some of it I've already talked about anyways.
Okay, cool.
The idea we're going with is something of a mixture of elements between the sphere grid and the license board. And in particular, the license board vis-a-vis the international version of 12.
Okay.
Where instead of one big board, there is a collection of 12 boards representing the Zodiac that were smaller, but were essentially pseudo classes. The approach that we're taking in regard to this, taking a lot of the job features, the feats, all of that kind of stuff, and splitting it off into three separate grids or boards. One of them is they are power, skill, and mana.
Okay.
You gain different types of spheres, which can unlock nodes on those. And of course, some more advanced stuff, you need a corresponding sphere, and you need a key sphere. In the same way that in order to unlock certain parts of the sphere grid, you needed those black key spheres.
Right. Yeah.
It's the same principle here. There is also the concept of master spheres and perfect spheres. One of them can be a wild card for the main three types. The other one is a perfect wild card, i.e., it can be used for both to unlock pretty much anything, even if it does have a key sphere requirement. The sphere grid is meant to be an alternative to the job and class system. Yeah. You only pick a class. You don't pick any jobs, because you're getting your job-like effects through this
as you're traveling through your grid.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And as far as materia, each of the materias is like a miniature skill tree.
Okay.
With a fusion effect where you can put these skills that from one materia onto another, but once you do, the ones that are carried over are locked. So if you have a fire materia, you've already learned fire from it. You fuse it with a thunder materia. You can't learn Fira and Firiga from that fused materia.
Okay.
Because I wanted to implement the materia fusion from Crisis Core, but in a way that wouldn't be too overwrought. Because a lot of games that have a lot of Final Fantasy TRPGs that have a materia system, it's not far removed from like gems in a Diablo game,
Right.
which I don't think that quite fits the fantasy.
No, it really doesn't.
So that's the approach we're doing instead.
Right on.
And of course, with some of the other advanced rules with cybernetics, if you're wondering if I'm going to be doing something like empathy, like it's cyberpunk, no.
No.
If somebody else wants to do that, they can house rule that on their own. I'm not doing it.
Sure. Yeah, no.
But
That doesn't seem to fit Legends here.
when you look at the characters that do have cybernetics in Final Fantasy, that whole idea of losing humanity, losing empathy, or going cyber psycho isn't really a thing.
No, it isn't a thing.
It's just a prosthetic.
Correct. That's exactly what it is.
But I will. That being said, I instead I focus on the fact that installing cybernetics is a painful process.
Oh, yeah.
And I was largely drawing upon the whole concept of automail in Full Metal Alchemist. How attaching automail is a very painful affair.
Right.
You know,
yeah, I like that payoff.
Yeah.
Meaning the balance between the two.
Yeah. I mean, there is still a catch. You have a certain amount of, based on how you built your character, you have a certain amount of slots for cybernetics. But I didn't want to make a full cyberpunk game and use the kind of cybernetics you see in Shadowrun or the like, because I feel that those kind of themes should be decided by the individual table, not by me. And
sure, and this is a nod inspired by, drawn from Final Fantasy, and if those elements are not in Final Fantasy, then it's just not even.
In that regard, I've stated in the past that a lot of the design ethos that I have is heavily inspired by my experiences with Japanese tabletop, where there's a concerted effort to emulate a certain feel rather than confine it to existing materials.
Right.
Like if somebody's making a new TTRPG in Japan, you're not going to see this notion of, oh, you've got to use this existing system.
Nope.
There are some games that are shared system, but they are very, very much in the minority.
Yeah, the system of Legends is totally Final Fantasy. It feels like Final Fantasy from beginning to end, and we're talking specifically about design, particularly the Chrome. All these character designs feel Final Fantasy, even the ones where you took liberty.
Yeah.
The formatting feels Final Fantasy. The mechanics that go along with the Chrome, meaning the tables, the layout, is just Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
It's
and
great.
something that I've had to clarify to some people is, when we say that this is meant to emulate the whole franchise, a lot of people think, oh, we're using everything from every game and putting them in one book. That was never the intent. And in the same vein, this is not meant to be just about the FFs that I happen to enjoy or you happen to enjoy.
Right.
There are certain ones that I'm not as much of a fan of as others. I'm kind of iffy on the slow progression of 5, even by the standards
Right.
of the time. But
Yeah.
I know that there's some people who swear by 5, and I'm not
Right.
going to get in their way.
Yeah.
At the same
Correct.
time, I know that I've gotten a lot of shit for my enjoyment of stuff like 8 or 10.
Right.
Although, word to the wise, if you're going to give me shit about my love for 10 people, you do so in a way that doesn't bring up that laughing scene that everyone references.
Yeah.
Because if
No,
you do
that's not
that,
a.
you kind of miss the point.
Right. Exactly. You got to give me much more than that.
Like
Yeah.
that laughing scene is bad on purpose.
Right. Exactly. It's supposed to be obnoxious and silly and goofballish.
Well,
That's Titus's character is that.
there's that, and there's also the fact that there was that whole speech that Yuna gave just before that about
Right.
smiling even when she's feeling sad.
Yes. Exactly.
Uh, and the whole thing of him basically making a fool out of himself to illustrate the point.
Right. And 8 is a fantastic game. I don't know what anybody's talking about.
There's a lot of people who want to play hipster because they think that FF should be eternally 6 and nothing else for all eternity, which is the reason why I said that Final Fantasy is not a franchise that ever had medieval roots in the way other fantasy games have had.
No.
That does not mean it has no roots, but that its roots are iteration and experimentation.
Yeah.
Which is why this is built as a sandbox.
Yeah.
Not as a particular setting. I'm writing certain settings, including one that I want to write that is going to involve treating the jobs and classes as a kind of modular power armor. But that's just one approach that I happen to be writing.
Yeah.
And
what's great about Legend is that you really could do so many approaches individually to the table, but everything you could ever love about Final Fantasy is right here and done in a way that is I believe that if you're going to take something that already exists and make it into something else, that you do so with care. And it's so clear that this was done with care.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so. But with that said, I think that is going to be where we wrap up this particular experiment. I'm going to be doing another one of these with someone else in the future because I want to get multiple perspectives, especially from folk who are just going to be seeing the designs we have for the first time here.
Yeah.
But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay!
home.